Okay, everybody, good morning. Although for a couple of Seahawks, it is not a good morning. But I thought we'd just go ahead and address this one now, early in the day, and then move on to other stuff later on. So if you watched yesterday's game against the Tennessee Titans, you almost certainly saw a couple of Seahawks leave with an injury. And unfortunately, these are not the tame injuries. Both of these injuries were very serious, very severe, and in this case, season altering. So let's just go through it real quick here. This video is sponsored by Prize Picks. So number one, and this is the big one, I think, Bud Clark. This one was also the obvious one, right? When you saw this injury, when you saw the replay, when you saw him getting carted off the field with an air cast, you knew it was bad news. But Bud Clark, rookie safety, broke his ankle yesterday, and he's going to miss several months. That is from Mike McDonald, so it's basically official. It's as official as it can be. Bud Clark is going to miss several months. Now, note, McDonald did not say he's going to miss the whole season. So some people would say, well, that opens the door for him to come back for the end of the year. But for a safety, for a defensive back, I can't imagine that's worth it. Like, Riley Mills was one thing because Riley Mills was able to actually do some stuff and make an impact barely playing, like just barely getting on the field. As a safety, I don't think as a rookie you should be missing the first several months of the season and then trying to play like 40 snaps at the end of the season and in the playoffs. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I wouldn't really think about that too much. I would assume he's out for the season. And even if he could physically come back for the very end, I don't think it'd be really worth doing. So I'm going to just move forward, assuming he's out for the rest of the season. And that really sucks. That really sucks. Bud Clark was going to have a role on this team. He probably wasn't going to start, but he was going to do stuff. And he was also a significant load bearer for our rookie class. And by the way, it's starting to look like that rookie class is not really going to do anything as rookies. So definitely disappointing here. Now, the other one is a little bit less notable, but nevertheless just as devastating for the player, Mason Richman. And this one's funky because he walked off. It looked fine. It almost looked like he could have gone back out there. It did not look like a big deal at all. It looked like cramps. But McDonald has said it is a major long-term injury. Did not say season ending, but the implication is pretty much. Now, this one doesn't quite hit the same. Richman was a backup. Richman was a guy who wasn't necessarily guaranteed to make the team, although I do think he was going to. And it's hard to say if Richman's absence is going to be a problem for this team. Because in order for it to be a problem, he would have had to have gotten on the field. And there's a pretty good chance that a healthy Mason Richman would have not seen the field outside of special teams and garbage time for the Seahawks this year. That's not the case for Bud Clark, but for Richman, it just depends on how things go. But I do think there's a pretty good chance that Mason Richman was just going to be a pure backup and only play on special teams. And I mean, it's still a tragedy for him, but it doesn't hit quite like the Bud Clark one. So those are the two injuries, and they are both long-term. All right, guys, let's take a quick break here to talk a little bit about Prize Picks, currently the #1 sports pick app in America. The app is very easy to use. Check it out to my left here. You can do player picks, where you just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. Or you can pick teams, where you pick winners, spread, or total on any game or fight. The app is available in most states, including California, Texas, and Florida. Right now, they have a great offer. You can play your first $5 lineup and get $150 in lineups if you win. All you have to do is use code HMA when you sign up. It's a brand new offer. Best time possible to get on the app. So get on over there and get to winning that first lineup. So remember, Prize Picks, code HMA. Download the app today, and remember to always gamble responsibly. And the question is, where do we go from here? Because there's no mystery here at this point. Bud Clark out for effectively the season, or at least he should be. And Mason Richman also out for the season. We don't have to sweat out like, oh, maybe he'll be back by October or anything like that. Doesn't seem like there's anything like that going on. So let's start with Richman because that's the pretty easy one. Like I said, I think he was going to be a backup at left guard. And again, it doesn't really matter what position you back up. If you can back up multiple positions, great. But I think this team was probably looking at him as a backup left guard. So ignore the depth chart for a second because I don't think it's accurately reflecting the way we looked at these players. But I imagine that the injury to Richmond is going to be a little bit of a reprieve for either Bryce Cabledew or Christian Haynes, depending on how the next couple of weeks play out with those two guys. Bo Stevens is listed as the backup left guard here, but I think we're looking at him as more of a right guard. So you need a backup left guard at that point, and I think it was going to be Richmond. And then you've got Haynes and Cabledew here. I imagine one of those two guys takes it. I think Haynes has probably looked better so far in the preseason, and I haven't really heard too much about either player in the training camp. So my assumption would be that Christian Haynes gets a stay, and Cabledew, it seems like he's not developing. I will say Cabledew is more physically talented, I think. There's a lot of athleticism there, and maybe we'll get enamored with that and be like, we got to keep it around for one more year. So that would be my guess. And I don't know how big a difference it makes, right? Like Christian Haynes, I'm pretty over the guy, and Cabledew has not developed. He's not stepped forward at all. So I don't think there's a difference between the two guys that much. Would Richmond have been a little bit better? I think so, but the difference would be pretty minor. And for all we know, Bo Stevens is going to be like the swing guard, and he's going to be the backup on both sides. So that one, pretty thin. Now, Bud Clark is a little bit more complicated. So you're looking at the secondary here, and you've got Devin Witherspoon and Josh Jobe outside starting corners. Nicky Manwari as your starting nickelback when he's healthy. And then you've got Okada and Love as your starting safeties. Now, Bud Clark cannot have been a candidate to play on the outside. There's no way. He was an excellent nickel corner in college, and he's also a safety. So if you're looking at Bud Clark, those are the three positions he maybe could have played this season. Now, I don't think he was going to start. He obviously wasn't going to beat out Love or Imanwari, and I think Okada probably had him beat as well, and Okada was going to get that starting job for 2026. So where we start, I imagine everything's going to be fine. The question I have is, let's say Imanwari misses the first game. Does Bud Clark maybe get involved then? Does he become like your starting nickel? Or do you go with the veteran in Igbenogany, which is what we have heard, admittedly, and then just kind of leave Bud Clark as a backup safety? That I don't know. I want to stress, Bud Clark was an excellent nickel defender in college. It would not have shocked me if he had been the backup nickel behind Imanwari. That's not what we were hearing, but that's one thing that I think could have developed. So if you're just looking at it through a safety lens, like let's just say they were just thinking about Bud Clark playing safety for them, well, who's your backup safety now? I imagine it's DeAnthony Bell. But DeAnthony Bell is another guy who's more of a nickel corner than he is a safety, or at the very least, I would argue that he's a little bit more effective there. And of course, this stuff is always debatable. This stuff is always close. It's not an easy pick. But I do feel like DeAnthony Bell, you want to get him closer to the line of scrimmage. As he gets older, maybe that changes, but I don't know if we're there yet. AJ Finley, maybe he gets involved. We do like him, but he was just hurt all year last year. And I think McDonald talked him up a little bit from last night's game. Rodney Thomas II is a guy we signed in free agency. Maybe he now makes the team, whereas he would not have previously. There is a history of cornerbacks changing position to safety when they get older. So maybe a guy like Trayvon Diggs moves to safety, but I don't think that's what we intended with him, right? So this one's a little bit harder. It depends on what we were looking at in terms of Bud Clark, and it also depends on how we differentiate safety from nickel corner. I imagine D'Anthony Bell's spot on the roster is relatively firmly punched in now, and he's going to be your backup safety. And then maybe, if I had to guess, Rodney Thomas is going to be the other backup safety. But this is where the pain comes in, because I suspect that Bud Clark probably would have gotten on the field in dime packages. He would have been your dime corner. You would have gone with Okada and Love as the safeties, Witherspoon, Job, Eamon and Clark as the corners. And Eamon and Clark are the inside corners. Now, I imagine that fourth corner is going to be Bell, maybe, which is not a terrible thing. D'Anthony Bell's a longtime NFL veteran. He can do good stuff. But Bud Clark definitely had more upside. And there's also, I guess, Igbenogany. Maybe he could move to safety, but I don't know if I want to do that with a couple weeks to go before the regular season starts. Okay, I think that's really about it. You could always go out and sign somebody. I think that maybe Donovan Wilson is still a free agent. I think that would probably be your main guy. Maybe I'll make a separate video at some point talking about free agent options, but there's not going to be a lot. Granted, you don't need anything amazing, but especially this deep into camp, I think you'd really hope one of your guys already on the roster is probably a better option than somebody you can sign. It's a little late. All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks. Let me know what you think. I'll take a look at free agency and maybe do another video at another time, but that one is where the pain comes in. All right, go Hawks.